Strong Enough merch is now available. Go to strongenoughpod.com and check out all the stuff that you can get so that you'll have those daily reminders that you are strong enough and you are worth it. Welcome to the Strong Enough podcast, where we talk about the challenges and celebrate the triumphs of people just like you. I'm your host, Claudia. Today's guest is a combat veteran, an MMA fighter, and a professional football player who also found herself in a domestic violent relationship. She's going to share her story with you and some of the things she's learned along the way. Please help me welcome Crystal Brolik Stokes. Hi, Crystal. How's it going today?
It's going fantastical. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And I just want to point out, we are recording this on a Monday morning, and you have the energy of like 3 5-year-old children running around, happy, excited, and I love it. I'm here for it.
This is where my daughter gets it from. Everyone's like, she's just like nonstop. I said, me. I have a friend that says apple tree. You guys are literally apple tree. So,
and that is why you are the mother-daughter duo, right?
There you go. Yes.
Nice. Well, we're going to jump in here because we have so much to talk about. It's going to take way more than one episode, but I would love it if you would start by telling the audience a little bit about yourself.
Oh, goodness. I never know what to say on these parts. Well, I am a former Marine. I'm a combat veteran. I am a single mom, a survivor of domestic violence. I am a believer in Christ, and I don't know. There's so much. I played I'm a professional athlete. I did football, MMA. I currently am training in jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai, and other trainings. So just all around.
And you have chickens.
And I have chickens. Yes, I have chickens. I have 10 chickens. Started off with 24, and I have 10 left that have survived.
We won't talk about where the other 14 are.
Nature, weather, they were chicks. Well, you always lose some because when you get them as chicks, they get squished by each other and stuff. So,
yeah, you
got hawks.
Stuff happens. Well,
life.
I'm already in love with you because you are kind of the quintessential badass. When we look at strong women and we look at women who kind of are able to do it all and take care of themselves and take care of their kids, like, you're pretty much it. How does that make you feel?
Overwhelmed at times. Like it doesn't seem real. It doesn't seem real. Honestly, I feel like I fail half the time. So, or I'm struggling. I really pray a lot about it. Just that God helps me be who He needs me to be, not who I need to be, but who He needs me to be for my daughter, for myself, for other people that He introduces me to and stuff. And I just really try not to focus on it too much because it otherwise the enemy can use that against me and stuff. So
has religion always been really important to you, or is that something that has kind of developed more in the last several years?
Well, when I was younger, we went to church, and it was something that was instilled in us just a little bit, like just a little foundation of it. I got, being the oldest of 3, I got more of it, I think, because I was older and I retained a little bit more than my brothers. So I don't, but we didn't, it stopped about my daughter's age. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because yesterday morning before we went to church, I actually was looking at her, just watching her as she's eating, and we were watching church online before we actually went to church, and she's singing, and I was just looked and I said, that's about the same age when my parents just kind of quit. and there was no more tutelage or guidance. And it was religious back then.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about the religion now. It's more of a relationship with God, and which is what it was intended to be, and not a religious matter. Um, and I actually had gone back to church at one point in time and had a very bad experience when I was older. I've always been in and out of churches trying to find something, but
Mm-hmm.
nothing ever felt right. And so either the way somebody preached or the way somebody did something, it just didn't sit right with me. And so then I just wouldn't go back. And it's not that I didn't have faith. I didn't have a daily relationship with Christ, and I was not talking to him like I should have been. And then in 2017, things in life were pretty dark. And actually, that's when Chris Cyborg she invited me to church, and I was late. I was so late, and that I missed the entire service. And she never knew that. However, it got my foot back in the door.
Mm-hmm.
And so God knew what he was doing. And I can look back on it now and be like, wow, it didn't matter that I missed the service. I probably wouldn't have paid attention anyway, but it got me back in the door, and at a time when I needed that. And then later on, a family from jiu-jitsu invited me out to go to church, and I had already had my daughter. And so I went, and that caused problems at the house. And but that really got me going back. And then I kind of, God really started working more and more in my life. And then it wasn't till I think it was really 2018 was full on. I hit the floor, crumbling, sobbing, broken down, a mess, and surrendered everything. I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I was so stressed out dealing with custody stuff, abusive stuff, just toxic narcissism. There was so much going on, financial issues, being a single mom, trying to navigate it, like feeling alone. There was so much going on that I never knew what groanings meant. I'd heard of speaking in tongues and groanings, and I understood what speaking in tongues was, but I had never understood groanings until that day. I couldn't get anything out of my mouth. It was, the best way I could describe it is, it was the deepest rooted, seated pain just coming out in a way that you can't express. And it was just letting it all go, just sobbing, tears, snot, just crumpled down, broken. And I've never experienced anything like it since. I've had smaller versions of those, but that was after that point. Then it's been a daily thing. And I can tell if I don't talk to him daily, like I could tell when things are starting. I'm like, I kind of need to sit down, and I need to just listen to this, or I need to read something, or I could tell. So it just was one of those things that over time, it was an over time.
So it sounds like, 2017 was a pretty rough time for you. You found yourself in an abusive relationship, in an unsafe relationship. We were talking earlier before we started recording that, a lot of people, most people would look at you and say, well, she's a combat vet, she's a fighter, she's a football player. How did this happen to her? And I think it's really important for people to understand that this truly can happen to anyone. So I would love if you would talk for a minute about how you found yourself in that type of relationship.
Well, at first it was very appealing when I met the individual. There were certain qualities that I was like, oh, they're adventurous. They just take off on a whim, spontaneous, right? Didn't bother me that they had 3 children of their own, and um, everything, there were red flags. I will give you that. There were red flags the first time we went out to go do something. But I kind of just shrugged it off as like a one-time thing. I will never do that again. But it started off as very normal, and they got me into jujitsu. We would take off on camping trips. We would do random things, and it was stuff that I was wanting to get into. And I originally had started speaking to them because I thought I wanted to know, I wanted to pick their brain because of their previous job and what they did. And I wanted the knowledge. And so that was like the door opening towards everything. And then shortly thereafter, the wishy-washiness began. And, it was just me. I didn't want to go back to, we had ended things because he wanted to go do something else, and they were moving and things changed, and that was fine. And, there was something, he went off on a Harley ride, and I wanted to go just to do the ride. And then when I show up, he was like, we're together and you're moving with us and all of this stuff. And I didn't think anything of it. I just was like, I wanted out of, California at the time. And I was like, okay. And if things don't work out, my mentality was, at least I'm not there anymore and I can start over. Like, I've got my own way. It was not a negative for me. Then on the road trip back, things started happening that I didn't realize till way later were like, hey, you should have paid attention to this. Just demeanor, attitude would change. He did not like it when I became very independent and took off on myself because he was in a bad mood. His mood swings were like crazy. I did think that it had to do with PTSD and different things. So I attributed a lot of the red flags to that. And I gave a lot of grace and a lot of mercy and understanding, and in areas that I should not have. On top of that, I was longing to be with somebody. I'd been single at that time, I think, for like 8 years. And I just wanted to be a part of something. And there was enough fun things or things that were distractions going on that I just didn't, it was not real warnings or threats at the time. Shortly thereafter, I found out that I got the news that I was pregnant, and he did not respond well to that. He was going through something with his ex-wife, and I remember him saying that he was teaching his kids that they shouldn't treat women except for how they should be treated, which was to be used and tossed aside. Don't ever get married. He was just dogging out women. And at that point in time, I was like, God's giving me a girl. Like, I'm going to have a girl. Like, I didn't want one. I was like, I really wanted a boy, just because I thought it would make it easier in my mind. And God was like, no, you need a girl for other reasons, not because of that, but there's other reasons that I'm giving you a girl. And I understand it now on why he did. I'm so glad that he did. And so the relationship just slowly, the narcissism started coming out, the anger started coming out. It was one of those things. And then I was scared. I was pregnant and I was scared. I didn't have financial stability. He had drained me of money. He had, and it was a slow process that he did over time too. Like, we went to school, that he kind of wormed his way into like what I should be doing and stuff, which was very interesting. I always thought that I was strong enough to just do what I wanted to do, but the influence that he was able to have really was very, like, it just was slow,
Mhm.
and you didn't realize it. And then before you know it, you're like, I just want to keep the peace.
Mhm.
And you just give in to things because you just want to keep the peace. You don't want to, and then I was taking care of the kids and I was doing things. And as long as I didn't outshine him, things were fine. But if I started to do things better, then there were problems with that
Mhm.
and stuff. And it was just a slow process. Before I knew it, he had instilled me with fear like never before. And given his background and things that he had done in the past, that just added to that fear because it was a very real situation. I had found out that he had had a history of domestic violence. Um, and he was very open about it, but he spun it to where
Mhm.
it was their fault and certain things, and he turned it into like fun story time. So it never really fell on him.
Mhm.
And the truth didn't come out until I was away from the situation. Um, and it got to the point like I was afraid, like I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to choose anything. I didn't want to go in. I didn't want to do anything if he was around. And um, we were together about 4.5 years. And there was a point in time where he started using jujitsu as a physical abuse. Because very smart and intelligent person. Um, and when you have somebody that matches you in height
Mhm.
and weight and is a little bit more like it's a little bit more in stature,
Mhm.
um, he's still going to be stronger than me. But you're not you're not dumb. You're not going to put hands on them like you did the shorter, smaller
Right.
women that you had in your life. Um, Instead, you're going to find an alternative. And so eventually, jujitsu became that outlet for physical abuse. And along with that came um, mental and emotional and verbal.
Mhm.
Um, so the mental, emotion, and verbal was at home constantly. And then it got added to the physical at training because he had to say things in order for me to react a certain way.
Mhm.
And then he would just smash me. I'd end up in tears most of the time. I always felt like I wasn't good enough. I would be questioning myself. I'd be questioning the instructors, like, am I doing this right? I feel like I'm wrong. Like there was no confidence anymore. Um, Even though I had won pans as a blue belt and I had done certain things, it was a mental struggle. And he just went back and forth. And it was um, when he saw that I was ready to I get any type of strength back
Mhm.
and be like, okay, well, if you're saying we're done, then I'll just take my daughter and we'll just go. And what do you mean? Well, I'm not leaving her here with you. You're
Mhm.
like, at that point, I knew he was abusive.
Mhm.
I had seen things, it was clear, but now the fear was, how do I get away without things escalating? And that was something that I never understood. I always looked at women and be like, why don't you just leave? Like, why would you
Mhm.
stay there? And after living it, because nobody ever tells you why.
Right.
And it's a legitimate fear of the repercussions. Well, why don't you call law enforcement? Because they do just enough to stay out of trouble. And if you call law enforcement, there's nothing there. And a
Mhm.
lot of women that cry wolf and create all these huge scenarios that ruin it for the true, genuine women that do need some help. Because if there's no marks, if there's nothing, and they do it just right, they're not going to be believed. Well,
Mhm.
it's like, oh, and if the man can talk a good game, that's the thing. If
Mhm.
he gets irate and everything, and he shows the law enforcement that, hey, she is right because I'm going nutso on you right now.
Mhm.
But if he's able to be that cool, calm narcissist, which they usually are, they can spin it and they say, well, ma'am, there's nothing here. There's nothing we can do. Just if there's more problems, just call back. And then once the door shuts, the real problems begin. And so instead of even dealing with that, you just say, I'm just going to try to find another way. And sometimes that way doesn't present itself. It just got to that point. There was, I think my breaking point was, it was, my daughter was about 6 months old. And we were he had been out drinking, and there was a whole situation that happened. And he came back, and he was like, oh, I want a beer. And so I went and got him one. He's like, here, have one. I said, I'm good. And so he's like holding this beer can out at me. And I remember he just stared at me, and I went to go reach for it, and he takes it away. He goes, well, fuck her then. And I was just like, who's he talking to? Right. And then he wanted to smoke weed, and he was like, here. And I was like, I don't want to. Right. And did the same thing, held it out. And I finally reached it. He sat there like a statue until I reached for it. And the moment I made a move, he was like, well, fuck her then. And then he started talking. I was like, this man's got like some demons in him, because he's got 3 different personalities that are coming out right now. There's all these other things. And then he says to me, he's like, I want to fight. Now there's a difference. When you do jujitsu, there's different vocabulary for that. I want to train. I want to roll. Basically those two things, like, that's it. You say I want to fight, that's a whole nother mentality. That's something completely different. And I was just like, I don't want to fight. I don't want to. And the thing about jujitsu is, if somebody starts doing jujitsu, you have to do it in order to get away.
Right.
And so he sat there and toyed with me for about an hour, got me in very vulnerable positions, which just, solidified that fear, because he put me in a spot where I literally looked at him and was like, he could really hurt me right now and do something. And for me, it was one of those things that it was just enough. He didn't go over that threshold, because if he would have, that would have been a full out, like, I would have had to fight for my life. Right. And that could have been very bad with my background, because you never know when you push somebody to that point. It's a life or death thing. I'm going for blood, and you will go for blood because it's your life, and you got your child upstairs, and you will fight. And so it's one of those things that I'm sitting there, and yes, he's got me in a very vulnerable position. And I think, yes, he could hurt me, but that doesn't mean that if it came down to it, I would have to, if I did anything back to him at that point in time, it would have escalated things to that point. So you either got to just take it, or you say, okay, am I ready to go for life and death right now? Am I ready to just go for his throat? And what's somebody going to say? I don't have bruises. Nobody knows what's going on. And it gets to that point, so you take it. And at that point, you have your self-esteem has been knocked down. It's been trampled on. Fear has been instilled, like all of this stuff that you never knew could happen to you. It happened, and it happened so slowly that you didn't realize it was happening. And I think that's the biggest thing that people do not realize, is that it's a very slow process. It's not always like what a movie would make it seem, to where they come in and it's like, rah, and they hit and they do this. I'm not saying that doesn't happen with some people, but for the majority, it's a very slow, break them down, get them where they want. And if they even show an inkling of standing up or being better, and, then you got to put them in their place somehow and stuff. So it was very, and I didn't realize the severity of it actually until, probably, around 2018, it had to have been like a year and some change afterwards. And that's when I started realizing how severe it had gotten. And that was due to a friend of mine that was in law enforcement. And I called and I was telling him what was going on and asking him for, advice as a friend.
Mhm.
And he's very smart. And he's like, well, anybody in your position, this is what I would tell them. So he wouldn't tell me something different because he's my friend.
Mhm.
He was like, as law enforcement, he's like, this is what I would tell anybody. I am your friend, but this is what I would tell anybody. I'm not giving you, like, I have to do it this way. And I called him enough times. Um, he's like, if you call me again about this situation, I'm going to have to do something about it. And that scared me to death because I was like, I don't know how he's going to react. He's going to have one of his buddies come after me. Something like this is going to happen. Like, I don't know what to do. And it scared me, that fear that he had instilled, like, kicked in. And I was like, okay. And so then I attempted to do things by myself, which was a long drawn out process. There's a lot of things that happened. But there was also, I learned to lean on God with it though too. And things, God was working throughout the whole thing. And it was a hard, hard process of just feeling like just despair and slowly getting my fight back and realizing, okay, how do I deal with this? You were strong before this. And the thing is granted, as a strong female, once I removed myself out of that situation, that strength did come back. And once I got just a small little bit of it and realized, hey, he can't do anything to me. Oh, wait, he's poking the bear. And I started recognizing patterns.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, I'm just going to take away all of this and I'm not going to feed into this. I'm not going to feed into that. This is poking the bear. That's poking the bear. This is the one sentence out of all of this. This is the sentence that matters. That's what I'm going to address. The rest of it is fluff to try to get me to look crazy.
Mhm.
And so once I took all of that away, I think he started to realize when I told him I'm not like any female that you've ever met, he finally started to realize that because he would just lump me in a category with everybody else. And for a minute, I probably was because of the way that I was dealing with things. But I do have a fight within me that he did not respect. And he tried to smother that out. But wrong. When somebody has that type of fight, that's the wrong person. Like, you're going to lose
Mhm.
no matter what. Like, they will get their strength back. They will get their fight back somehow, some way. And it will not end well for the other person. It might be a battle. It might be an uphill battle. But in those battles, that strength will come back, and it comes back with a vengeance in such a way that it's it's just, you would never believe. You're like, where did all that come from in you?
Where was
Like,
that?
and then again, you look at that and you say, well, where was that? Like, during this, and you're
Mhm.
like, there was there was smothering techniques. There were techniques to somebody that is abusive, and they learn. And they learn techniques, and you're usually not the first one. And if you are the first one, it's because they all start somewhere. It was probably at a very young age, and they didn't realize that was going on. And depending on the level and stuff, it just they learn. And they're like, oh, I'll do this better with this one. Oh, I'll do this better with this one, or I'll just use this and it was all about using what
Mhm.
could he benefit out of something, and so it was all hidden, and I didn't see it when it first started. So
I love that you pointed out that it was more of a process. There wasn't one moment or one time that you could put your finger on to say, this is when the abuse started. This is when he started to break me down. Because I think a lot of people want that tangible moment. And there usually isn't one. Like you said, there are some abusers who just, day one, they start punching you. But generally speaking, it is more of a slow burn
process to break you down. How hard is that to explain to other people or to current victims to try to help them understand what's going on and help them see where they're at in a relationship that might not be healthy or safe?
It's the challenging part. First, this is really, I'm just now opening up, like starting to open up about a lot of it. Like I'll mention little things here and there and stuff. And I think I've spoken to only a couple people really about their situation and I try to just encourage and just share what I went through and how I got over, or not over, but how I got through, and some of the tricks that I learned on how to, like, as far as like the only give them bullet points if they're writing something to you. Don't respond to every single thing. Don't give them, ammo in order to, they're going to make it sound as if they've got all this power, but really they don't. Those are all just idle threats. And they allow your imagination to run wild and do it for you, because the slow burn at the beginning of everything was instilled. So by that time, they're just like, oh, well, I've already said it's just like cults, they program them very slowly at a young age. So even if they happen to run away, all they have to do is leave little things and they will slowly make their way back to where they were, because it's been programmed in them. So it's the same thing. And the thing about that though too is you also have to want it to leave. You have to want to get out of it. You have to, as hard as it is and as scary as it is, you have to want to, and God will eventually, he'll provide that way, but you have to you have to want. This is with anything, whether it be an addiction or training or good or bad, like you have to want to do something in order for it to change. And I heard somebody say there was change isn't change until you've changed. And it just says it all. Like, you just have to mull that around a bit for yourself. But I mean, it's the truth. Change isn't change until you have changed. And you have to want that change. So that being said, there's always a way out, as scary as it might be, and at whatever level it is. I know that they have places to where it's anonymous and you can just escape in the middle of the night. Old boy's got to go to work at some point, unless they don't work. There's still a point in time. There is still a point in time where he will leave you alone because he wants to go do his own thing. And he doesn't want you to tag along. He wants to do whatever it is because he feels like he's got all this power. There's always a point in time where you will be left alone. I don't care if you got to go hop on a bus, find some change in the couch, take what's on your back only, but go sit but get yourself out of there. And then if it's that severe, and then and then pray about it. How I left, because I was afraid. I was like, my fear is I didn't, this is me. People will look at me like, they're like, what's wrong with you? I was concerned that if I left, right, when I left, I did not want to leave at a certain point, because it would have made things difficult for him the following month, because he would have had to pay rent by himself. Plus his 3 kids were starting school. Plus he was starting school. And then he would have to find a new place to go and do everything. Like, I didn't want to do that. And I remember his friend who I was talking to about the situation, I was and he was like, you just got to go. He's like, dude's off his rocker. He's like, I'm not even talking to him. Like, there's something going on. Right. And I told him why. I was like, well, there's this and this. Like, I don't want to. He's like, why are you taking him into consideration? He's like, has he ever taken like you and you into consideration? I said, no. He goes, then why are you taking all of that into consideration for him? I said, well, I'm not him. I am me. And I'm not trying to make things worse. I don't want to put fuel on the fire. Like, I want a peaceful, like, I just want to go and stuff. And my situation allowed that, so it was, I didn't know of, and God is good, because I still hadn't been going to church consistently or anything like that. And I always find it really amazing when I have a conversation with somebody and I express a concern, and then God provides a way. And I didn't even it's not me on my knees and praying or me saying, God, I don't know. And it's just a conversation, and it's a genuine from my heart. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do and how I'm supposed to, but this is what this is. And then God's like, well, here's your answer. And I'm like, whoa, like, how, like, that's like, thank you. Like, okay. And that's exactly what he did. And he provided a 60-day notice. And the 60-day notice came at the time where he was going on a Harley trip for a month. So that left me the whole month by myself to clear everything out by myself, with my best friend. She helped me. And I was out by the time he got back, and that gave him the final month. The bills were paid. He knew in advance. He had 2 months advance notice, like what he needed to do. He still chose to do what it's no longer on me. And that's it, and everything. So that to me was also like, okay, keep your eyes on God. And that was another step in my faith. That was another step in my journey. That was it was another stepping stone. And I think I recognized it at the time, but it wasn't, I wasn't saying it out loud. I wasn't comfortable saying, like, God provided a way for me. Like, I wasn't gonna, but by myself, I was like, thank you. So.
I know that after you left, you continued to suffer in that you went through custody battles and just a lot of difficult fighting. Was there ever a point where you thought, man, I should have just put up with this and stayed, versus
No.
all the, okay. Perfect.
No. Once I got away, well, let me take that back. There are days the devil gets to me, even to this day. Like, if I get like, I'm like, well, maybe, and then I think about it, I'm like, no, dude's like horrible. And it's just like it's just a fleeting thought. It really is just like a split moment. At the beginning, no, I was just planted, and I was, by that point in time, so when I left, I went and stayed with my best friend. She had a condo, and she had like this little small office space that wasn't even like the size of a regular room. It was, smaller than my barracks room used to be, type thing. Like, it was just like,
that's small.
I think the places, like my areas inside tents on deployments were bigger than this, but I had more space for that. But I was there. I had put all my stuff in storage. I had just what I was needed for my daughter and myself, and it was a place to stay. It was a roof over our head, and it was a way to get back on my feet. And that happening, I had gone off. Things were relatively civil. He had made plans to like take off. He was like, I'm done. He's like, I gave my kids back to their mom. he's like, I'm out of here. I don't have a job. I don't have this. He's a combat veteran as well. And he's like, I don't have this. I don't have that. He's like, I'm free to roam and do whatever I want and stuff. And so he literally, when he moved out of the house, he took whatever could fit in his Jeep, on his Harley, or that of significant value. If it did not fall into either of those areas, he got rid of it. So I got a lot of the stuff. Like I got things, tools and different things. And I was like, well, now you at least, you know, like if you need a tool or you need something, I was still trying to be civil. And everything. And that just kind of still gave him power. And the moment that I took that away, then that's when he got really aggressive. And he got really angry and upset, and he started threats. And he would really got aggressive with the verbal abuse and trying to just scare me with I'm gonna take her from you and you're never gonna see her and this is what. And I'm like, can you even tell me like what food she likes? Like, we've lived in the same house and I think you've held her all of like 5 times. So it's one of those things. There were things that he did that I did not agree with. Like if she would cry, we were in the vehicle, I would put my hand back there and he's like, you shouldn't do, he's like, don't do that. He's like, just let her cry it out. Or he would turn the radio up and roll the windows down to try to get her to shut up. And I was like, she's like 3 months old, dude. Like,
she doesn't get it.
You know, I just let me put my hand back there. She smells me. She's like, oh, I'm good. Like I was first time mom, but I was getting these little notifications that say during this stage of baby's life, they will start experiencing this. So they might do this because things are coming into focus, or they're starting to hear things different now, or, you know, and it's scary. Like, and if you really think about it, they cry because they're scared, because they're like, what is this? Like, could you
what
imagine
is happening?
Like, oh, like I could kind of see, like, can you imagine? So just things like that, and the manipulation tactics and things that I was witnessing and stuff. So I was just like, no, I'm good. But yeah, so he left. He was supposed to go out of state, and then I had my fight. I went and I got invited to go do an MMA fight, and I did. And that kind of, I do wonder about that if I had not taken that fight, if things would have ended up differently, or how. I know they would have, but how they would have been different. He probably would have stayed up in whatever state he had gone to visit his buddy. He would have stayed there. But I had the fight, and suddenly he was super nice, you know. Hey, Mama Cakes. Hey, how's this going? Hey, we should travel. We should go to Hawaii with, you know, Neela, and we should do this and we should do this. And hey, and I'm like, what is going on? Like, I was like, I thought you were staying up at this state. And he's like, no. I was like, well, what happened? He goes, oh, I didn't get my tags and we got high all the time. Okay. So, and then I was on guard at that point, and I was like, all right. And then when he got back, he was like, well, I want to see her at this time and this time and this time. And I was like, well, that doesn't work because I'm training. So here's what works right now. And that did not bode well, because he was not in control. And so that's when things started happening. And that's when the threats started happening again. You're denying me, you're doing parent alienation, you're denying me this, you're denying, and deny was his word, right? It was, you're denying me of this, and you're denying me of that, and you are like, you are being a horrible mom, and you are, and it's to the point to where he just tried different tactics. He tried to get his mom involved at one point, and she sent a message. I'm like, I haven't heard from you in like 6 months, you know? And she only sent like 1 or 2. And when I didn't respond, there's like, she said some hateful things before she took off too. Like, it was just, it's in the family. Like, it's just, it's generational in that family. And so um, uh, it ended, well, it with his side. I don't know what goes on with that, but it no longer is connected to us. So those generational things have no effect on her and I anymore. But yeah, that's what started everything. And I went and I filed because I was afraid that he was going to do it first and try to lie. And I didn't tell him that I filed and got a lawyer. And I tried to do everything right. Like when I had moved, I invited him over. He didn't show up. I had a strongman event that I was doing. He was supposed to come to that so he could spend time with her while I was doing it. Like I tried. And because it wasn't what he wanted to do when he wanted to do it, he made it difficult and was like, just basically threw a fit, and I call them mantrums, right? It's a man tantrum. Like, and I just, looking back on it now, and I've healed and I've forgiven him, which was a process in itself, but I've forgiven, like, hurt people. I was once a jerk too. I was once manipulative too. I once did things that I probably, not probably, but I did things that I look back and I'm like, Lord, forgive me for that. And please, if that, like, remove that hurt from that person, please, and, but I was worth forgiveness, and God forgave me. And so when you look at it that way, and then you remind yourself, because the devil will try to trick you when you start to forgive people, he will use that and say, oh, but that makes it okay what they did to you. No, that's false. The forgiveness is not for them. It doesn't condone what they did. It doesn't mean that you agree with whatever. It doesn't mean that you have to be friends. It doesn't mean you have to physically go to them and say that you forgive them. You just have to forgive and say, and it started off as words for me. It was straight up like, I forgive him for this and this and this. And then I thought I was failing at it. Honestly, I was like, I forgave him, and I still have this, like, he would do something. I was like, bah, right? And I just went, I'm like, gosh, and it's just like, or I would break down because I was so frustrated. I was like, like, I don't get it. And then I would stop, and then I would just pray. And then I just started praying. I would just pray over him, and I would just forgive. And I started cutting generational ties. I started severing generational ties. I started severing generational curses. I started severing, any type of tie between myself and him, him and me, because my tie, I don't want him, like, just God remove me from his thought process, remove her. Right. So I did every combination of tie you can come up with. I denounced it and severed it, and disintegrated it. Right. And, but it was a process. And, I remember watching, I don't know, the movie, I Can Only Imagine. At the end of that movie, they have the interview with the actual singer, right? And because of his story and how everything went and how it started and how it ended, right, with his father, his interview at the end, he made a comment and said, there's times where, when I personally, he said, how did he put it? He goes, I had such a great relationship with my dad at this point, and all of this stuff. He goes, but I find myself with my kids, sometimes I find myself back there in like when the bad was happening, or I remember something, or I'm doing something, and I have to forgive my dad all over again. And then he goes, and that's when I realized forgiveness it's continual. And God sent that to me. Like, I watched that right at the right moment, because I thought I was failing at the forgiving thing, because I was like, I'm forgiving and I still feel this anger. Like, am I not doing it right? Am I not genuine about this? Like, am I not like, and that's when I realized it started off as words, yes, but it started. And then eventually, as I kept praying and I kept reading my Bible, or I kept understanding myself and figuring out, like, to like me and what I needed to heal, it allowed me to forgive on deeper levels in such a way that I had like revelation knowledge about the situations. And I realized, like, you know, like in the movie The Shack, when he's in that cave and they go back and she's like, well, what would you say to the man that's doing this to this boy? Well, kill that man because he's beating that child. And then she shows him another picture. Well, what would you say to this man? You know, that's the man that you said you would have just killed, because he's being beaten too. You don't know where somebody has started, what evil has penetrated generation to generation. You don't know. And granted, I'm not saying that, hey, this is a free pass for people to act any old way and to hurt people. And some people are just evil because they've never had a light in their life whatsoever. And it's such a deep generational demonic influence or generational curse. Like, some people are just downright evil and they want nothing to do, and that's their choice, right? If they don't, it still comes back again. It's, you have to want something. It's free will. You have to choose. And, you know, with his situation, you know, I don't have to have communication. I don't have to talk. I don't have to do any of that. And in fact, I severed all ties. I don't take money from him. I don't do any of that. And we are left alone. And I've had some people tell me, you know, well, that's not right. He needs to. I said, this little amount of money is not worth my peace. If it costs me my peace, it is way too expensive, and hers. And I'm raising her in the way she should go, so she won't depart from it. And I've severed all of that. So I am the end of that cycle, not just with his, but my old cycle too. And that was something earlier when we had, you know, I was looking at her, she was sitting there, and I was thinking, that's when my parents stopped. That's the end of that cycle too. So it's not just on that side of the house. It's, you know, it's with my side too. It's with my generational stuff. And I've severed generational curses within my family. And I've separated myself from toxic family members and people. And if you're not here to edify and to lift up, and you don't want to walk in that same light, then you take that over there. There's no condemnation. I'm still going to live over here. If you would like to see what's going on, then you're more than welcome. I will be that living epistle. You can watch and see. And if the Lord leads you, then the Lord leads you, because you have a change of heart. And, you know, it is what it is, but it's not my job to change you in any way, shape, or form. So that same goes with him. And so you just, eventually I forgave, and it's like, I forgave everything. And then I really had to just say, you know, this is over the, like, from 2017 all the way to even like last year, actually. And that was the final severing. I think there's like, you know, like the little tiny last little piece is like, ding, it's going to go here or like, no, that the severing has happened. The nail in the coffin is what's going to happen. So it takes a while. It's not a fast process. Just like the abusiveness was not a fast process. There is a process, and you have to remain strong in faith, and you have to remain strong in what's going on. It's not going to be a quick, you know. And I think that's what people fail to realize with a lot of things in life. Like, you don't just get fat overnight. It's a slow process. You don't just get in shape overnight. It's a slow process. You don't just learn the Bible overnight. It's a process. You don't just suddenly have a relationship with God. It's a process. Like, Yes, you can give your life to Christ. Yes, you can repent of your sins. You can confess your sins. You can accept Jesus into your life. Now the real journey begins. And it's a process because he has to teach you, because you're new, you're learning things, you're understanding. And same thing, you don't just know something, you don't just know math. It's a process. Everything in life is a process, right? So I think we tend to forget that because we want, with society nowadays, I think everything happens so fast that you just want it now. And every person feels entitled that I want this now. I want this now. It's like, a little patience, please. Like, slow your roll. Let's take a step back, think about what's going on, and then go from there and stuff. So it's a process. And there's always, if you don't feel like you can talk to a human being, there's, pray. And prayer is just a conversation with God. That's all it is. It's not something where, religion has made it out to you. You have to do this and say this many Hail Marys and do this. It's like, what? That's old. You're old covenant and Pharisees that didn't want things to change because their ego and their pride. Like, no, literally, new covenant says just, hey, I want a relationship with you. Grace, here you go. You accept me? Yes? All right. You're good.
Let's do this.
Let's, right? So
what is the biggest lesson that you have taught your daughter through all of this that is the most important to you that she is learning or has learned?
She is not fatherless. She has a father. Her father is God. So she doesn't, and I taught her this as soon as she could understand it. I don't actually remember a time where I've never told her that. Like, okay, we'll talk to your father, and there's times like she'll go up to people. She's like, my dad's in heaven. People, I think it's the most precious thing ever. So I'm laughing because it just makes my heart so happy. And she, my dad's in heaven. Like, it's a random conversation. She's just randomly out of nowhere. Oh, well, my dad's in heaven. And they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. She's like, no, it's God. Like, it's God. And I did that very specifically because, one, it's true. And two, I don't need her growing up thinking that she's lacking for something. She doesn't need to have the society rules of you're fatherless, because she's not fatherless. She might not have an earthly father, but God will provide that when the time is right, when he provides that. But she does have it, but she has a father. That's our heavenly father. That's her father. And so when she gets frustrated, when she gets upset, when she gets sad, when she feels a certain type of way, it's like, all right, well, here, let's talk to our father about it. Like, let's ask him to help you. Or we give thanks and we say, thank you for being an amazing father to Neela. Thank you for being an amazing father to me. Thank you for being an amazing father, and I feel like that was extremely important, and one of my thoughts was, a lot of, you go into school, or she's homeschooled, but, you do the family thing and stuff. I never wanted, like, that shouldn't be absent. Like, no kid should ever feel like they are fatherless, because they do have a father. They might not have an earthly father that's here currently, but they do have a father, and they do have somebody to talk to. And I think that would help a lot, like with kids that don't have, like, they only have that single parent, that single mom and stuff. And I think that would help with things a lot. And then and then with that, I also put the right people, like, I make sure the right people are surrounded by her. And if it's not, then you have no place around myself either, so she can see what the good is. When I was growing up, I always said my parents should have gotten a divorce and remarried, so I could have at least seen what happiness was. instead of sticking it out for the kids, they were miserable. They argued or they didn't talk at one, by a certain point, they slept in different rooms. Like there's things like that all has an effect. And that's one of the reasons why I was so like, I wanted attention. I wanted to feel wanted. Everybody wants to be wanted to some degree. I just wanted it more in that way. And with my situation, I was just like, oh, look, he's got kids. He goes here, I'm wanted and stuff. And he used that. He exploited that and stuff. So, yeah.
One of the things that I love about you and your parenting style is that you give the consequences, but you allow Neela to make the decision. So if she still wants to do something, knowing the negative consequences, then you allow her to do that. And then she suffers the consequences. What taught you that, and how beneficial has it been? Because I think it's amazing that you still give her the choice, but she has to deal with what's coming either way.
I think I don't know how I came up with that. I think it was just me trying to teach her right and wrong, and there's free will. And I was trying to explain to her what the difference between a consequence, like when you do something bad, it's a consequence. So I was trying to explain this whole process, so she just didn't feel like, oh, I'm getting my butt beat. And I wanted her to understand what was going on. I think at first also, I didn't discipline her in a certain way because of fear, because of the custody stuff that was going on. I was afraid that it would get taken out of context, because manipulation was a very big thing. And so that still bites me in the butt, because sometimes now, like, she's like, well, why are you suddenly, why are you enforcing something that you used to never, like the first 4 years of my life, and it's like, well, that's my mistake, and then I just ask God for help with that. However, I think it comes from me trying to explain to her, so she can understand exactly what it is. And it's super, it works great. She fully does understand a consequence and what it means. You do something wrong, something bad is going to happen. You do something, you make the right choice and a good choice, then the bad thing doesn't happen. It might be more challenging, or there might be other things, but here we just learn to, it gets her thinking, gets her to think about her actions. What is she doing? Why is she doing it? And I think, and I get that from my dad, because he wasn't as extreme. He didn't go to like what I'm doing with it. His was different. His was very straightforward and to the point. It was, I remember him saying to me, because I punched a kid in school just to see what it felt like to punch a kid. And I think I was like in the 5th grade. And I was scared of my dad. And so I went and apologized to him. I'm like, I'm so sorry. And I wasn't. I just didn't want to get in trouble with my dad. So anyway, my dad, it was the first time that he didn't like, I didn't have to cut a switch. I didn't like, none of that happened. It was, he approached me completely differently. And he said to me, first and foremost, don't ever touch another person unless they touch you, because then you're at fault. And he goes, and I mean, like, even if you say, don't touch me, and they lay a finger on you like that, stomp a mud hole in their funky behind. And I was like, okay. All right. And these are things he only told me like once. And I remember that, like, okay. And I will not be the first one to be like, ooh, right? Because you're emotional if you end up doing that. And it does create nothing but problems. And And then he told me, he goes, if you can deal, no, if you can't deal with the consequences of your actions, don't do what you were going to do. But if you can deal with the consequences, by all means, do what you want to do. And that was it. So from that point on, I thought about my actions, right? I thought about them. And I was like, I could take an ass whooping. I'm good. And I would do it anyway, right? So it got me to think, but I don't think it did exactly what he was like, to make the right choice. So that's where I kind of differ. Like, I want her to think, but I want her to choose the right choice. Like, even in the Bible, it says, life and death lie in the power of the tongue. But he's like, here, let me help you. Like, choose life. Choose life. Like, don't choose the death part. Like, don't go the bad way. Like, choose the good, right? I'm going to tell you right now, like, blessings come from this part, not this, right? And so it's kind of the same thing. It's like, here, I'm going to give you your options, but I'm going to tell you right now, you might want to choose this good part right here, because this is really going to suck, right? And so there's every once in a while she's learning. And so she still toes that line, right? And so she's like, oh, well, I haven't been, I think it might just be her age group. It's like, oh, I haven't been in trouble for a while. And so here, I just need a fresh reminder that this is it, And so she did something the other day, and oh, she lied. And it was just a small little, it was more of a and that part's hard for me. So she tries to manipulate something. I really have a hard time with that. And my mindset goes back to all the other stuff. And I really try to, I'm like, no. And I don't ever want to speak ill, like in a negative way, because that only causes anger, hate, and problems way down the road. Right. And so I myself cannot overreact emotionally. And I have to think about what it is first. Right. So that's another thing. Cycles being changed, things being changed. And another thing, I don't lie to her. If she asks me a question about something about the past, about something, the way that we were treated, about something, or she asks about something, I tell her, but I tell her to her level. So I don't over explain something. I don't give her nitty gritty details about stuff. I mean, half the time, all it is like, if she needed to know something, he was not a nice person. She doesn't, and then if I say things along the lines of like, we don't manipulate people that are not nice, manipulate like that. And if she happens to remember, I say he's not a nice person, she correlates the two herself, but she also correlates that with anybody else in her life that she has met that is not nice. So I have never, ever, that is something that I've done, is I've never specifically pointed out like him in particular with something. I would never do that. And I think that in the whole process, one of the other things that I've taught her is, because of things she has had to learn life lessons early on, which are good. And I think that I wish they would have just happened under different circumstances and not the way that they happened. But it's still a blessing that they happened, because I think it's important that parents would do it anyway. Like, if a kid says they don't want to be touched, they don't want to be touched, and it's in a way, inappropriate ways, it's not like, hey, do this. And they're like, hey, no, it's like, stop being a dummy and get your butt away. Like, I'm going to push you where you need to go type thing. Right. But it's one of those things. If they don't want kisses, if they don't want hugs, if they feel like I don't want to do that. It's like, you got that creepy uncle, or you got that like, I just don't like, you never know. And so that was something that I had to teach her early on, that what was right and what was wrong. And if anybody ever touched you, or if anybody, kind of like what my dad did, it was just at a way younger age than what I learned it, right? And a little bit different. My dad's explanation was stomp a funky mud hole in their behind. Literally, those were his exact words. And I would envision, right? Because you say things like that and it leaves it up to the person's imagination, which is great. And so I would literally think of somebody and me stomping on them and like squishing them out like because I'd stomp, foot go through them. And but it to me it just was like violence, like that's what that meant.
Mhm.
And whereas now it's like times have changed a lot to where you have to be a little more specific with, um, situational awareness and this and that, and then stomp a mud hole in them,
Right.
and everything. So I think that, she's had to learn all of those things. And but yeah, the manipulation part, when that's a hard one for me when she
Mhm.
does that, because it triggers, and I want to make sure that um I don't discipline due to trauma or
Right.
due to, an emotional reaction, because you never want to do that. You don't ever discipline when you're emotional, because you don't do stuff out of emotion. You need to stop. There's a specific reason you're trying to teach something and what it warrants. So like I've said, she'll get as many whacks with a switch
Mhm.
as is warranted. And there's never any that it's not like, when I was growing up, every other syllable, and you're like running in circles, and it's just their anger. You can feel the anger coming through
Right.
the switch, and you're like, or your hands get, everything gets hit because you're like, I need to break out, and you're just, whole thing and stuff. I mean, I wondered about that. And I remember funny story. I was at MLS school for the Marine Corps, and we had Christmas break, and my dad's side of the family was in that state, and so his sister came and picked me up, and I lived a very sheltered life, I found out. I am thankful for that life. I am very glad for it. I actually am. I'm very glad my dad walked away from stereotypical Black cultured society.
Mhm.
I am very thankful and appreciative of that. And they picked me up. Her friend was with her, and she's got this gold tooth with a T in it. It's like, she's got a tooth with gold around it. I was like, oh my gosh. They're both like huge. My dad's like super in shape, and they're both like just overweight. And I was
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh. And accents and everything, and just complete ghetto. And I was just like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And I remember we stopped at a butcher shop along the way. And I just remember, because we're on the East Coast. And so I remember I was like, wow, there's a shack in the woods. Like, what? And I remember calling my dad, and I was like, there's moldy meat hanging from the wall.
Mm.
Excuse me. I was like, there's moldy meat. And he started laughing at me. And he was like, it's not moldy meat, it's curing. There's salt and stuff. And then I remember feeling upset for him laughing at me. You're the one that sheltered me and didn't show me any of this stuff. And now you're laughing at me because I don't know what this is. Like, this is a whole new world for me.
Mhm.
Right. And I was just so I was a little bit perturbed about that. But, at this age, now I look back and it is kind of funny. I'm like, there's moldy meat. And it's like, no, dummy, there's not moldy meat. And then so we left there, and then we got to the house, and they did the whole, chitlins and greens and pig's feet. And I was like, I'll just stick to whatever that is over there. That's normal. I'll just take that, and that's it. And they're like, okay, you don't have to eat all this other stuff. I was like, all right, well, I see why my dad looks the way he does, and I now see why y'all look the way you do, right? So, and these are all things that I'm like thinking, I'm just processing and taking it
Mhm.
all in. And I can see now why my dad has made the choices that he has made, and what he has done, and just taken that all in. And I remember that his sister had adopted, I think there's, I don't know how many she adopted, but at the time there was like 4 of them, 5 of them. One was a baby.
Mhm.
So there was like 4 of them, and somebody did something they should not have done. And when she sat them all on the couch and she said, what is this and this and this? And he was like, well, you tell me. She was like, say again, what? Like repeat, like speak up. And I never got that until now, being a mom, the mumbling, right? Like stop mumbling, own it. You did something wrong, just own it, right? And so they mumbled again, and she was like, okay, everybody drop pants, right? So all the kids pull their pants down to their ankles. Now, the difference is we used to turn around and lay down on, like I had a waterbed, so it was my waist height, which really kind of sucked. But, especially if my feet didn't touch the ground, at first. So, but we used to go like that, and he would just like spank our butts. And if your feet came up, your hands usually went behind your back. So anything I got in the way of your butt got whacked, right? This was very interesting to me. So they're all sitting there, and she goes across their shins. And I was like, what in the world? Every single leg goes up, boop, right? Because that hurts. So everybody's legs goes up. Now she gets the butt. And nothing else can get in the way. No hands, no nothing. And I literally had to go pick up the baby because I started laughing because I realized what was going on. I correlated my dad, and I was just like, what in the world? This is where he gets it from. Like, I didn't understand that growing up, and my mom was, she's white. She's the pushover. She went, it is the way that it was. My dad was the disciplinarian. My mom attempted a couple times, I'm going to come here. She get a wooden spoon. And I'm like, that's a joke compared to what we get beat with this guy. Right.
Right.
So, she tried, and you, can you stop now? Like, it did hurt, but it wasn't like anything compared to like what he would do and stuff. So, I take with my daughter, I take what my dad and what I went through, and I don't take it in a negative. I see what it was meant for, and I just tweak like the parts that were done out of that were not done out of love, or they could have done better, but they were doing what they knew. I mean, think about it. I just witnessed how his family did things. And then that's another thing, a generation, and it just passes down. Well, and if I really want it, now that I think about it, I originally started doing that too. When I would babysit my brothers, I would hit them the way I got hit, and then I got in trouble for that. You can't do that. So then I had to come up with like creative ways to do things. And so, which, got you to thinking. So you look at all this stuff, and instead of looking at things and being like, oh, my life is so hard, my parents did this, and you like look at it and try to look at it from a different perspective. And then I think where a lot of people, they're like, well, this is what happened to me, and I don't want to do that to my kids. I think that's like, to a degree, like you should do that, but that's only with the negatives, that they didn't have something. But you have to look, your parents did instill something in you. You did learn something. It might not have been the way that, just like God, what does he do? You ask him for help, or you ask for something, and he's going to do it, but it just might not be the way that you thought, because he knows the better way. So an example of this is to 2020. You look at 2020 and you say to people, 2020, people were saying at the very beginning, the year of clarity, because 2020 vision, it's going to be a year of clarity, right? It's great. And then you ask people, was 2020 a year of clarity? And they're automatically, no, it was a shitstorm. There was this, chaos ensued, blah, 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 blah. I said, so it was a year of clarity. It's just not the way you thought it was going to be a year of clarity. So, because it became very clear where your priorities were, where the government's priorities were, where your family's priorities were, where your priorities with Christ was. Things became clear. Where do you put your priorities? Do you have do you have a relationship? Oh, you strengthened your relationship. Where's your marriage at? Like, all of these things became clear, but you're choosing to look at it in a negative light. So you're still like, you still have your blinders on. But if you became clear and you're like, oh, it's your perspective and how you're looking at it. And so it's the same thing. It's your perspective. Like, okay, what in the generational line needs to cease, but what things were good? Way back in pioneer days, they taught kids a certain way. Why? Because it was safety. They had to learn how to live and how to survive. I think a lot of those things that needed to remain got tossed because the same way society nowadays do with their kids. Oh, I didn't like getting spanked, so I'm not going to spank my kid. Well, now your kid's a brat and they talk back. They're entitled, which turns into entitled adults that don't want to do anything and think that they want to. I deserve $20 an hour at McDonald's. No, sweetheart, you do not. You are, that's a beginner starting out, like learning how to, that's one of those jobs that's meant for that. There's other jobs, like you're learning things. You got to crawl before you walk. You can't switch. It's just, I mean, you can't go from one career to another and think that you're going to start off at this high paying, like you just started a completely different genre, you know? Now, if you're in the same thing and you're promoting up, like that's a totally different story. But it's like, oh, I no longer want to be an MMA fighter. I'm going to go over here and be a scuba instructor. Okay, well, you got to start at the bottom. Right. And that's not a bad thing, because if you think about it, when you start at the bottom, you learn all the intricate details. So as you get up there, you're like, this was a problem when I was there. So how can I make that better? How can I increase this here? And I think if you think of things that way in terms of parenting and life in general and what you're doing, and then you pray about what it is that's going on, you'll be given the wisdom, right? Wisdom is knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. You'll be given wisdom in situations. You'll be given revelation knowledge. You'll be given strength. You'll be like all abundant prosperity. You know, you'll be given all of these things. And I think that as I have grown once again with myself in learning how to forgive other people, not just the one, but just forgiving across the board and learning myself, that has also helped me learn how to parent better, to where I come up with something that's a little bit different. She's still like, the other day when she sat there and it was something very small and minute. She was trying, well, that's why that is not why you did that. You're making that up now to make, and it frustrates me. So then I stopped and she did something else. So she had to do 20 push-ups, and then she got her butt beat, and then she had to sit in wall sits, and I made it hurt. Like she had to literally, she was struggling, but you remember pain, you remember it. It's like, okay, this was the consequence. And it's like, hey, do I need to go back to that? And she's like, no, ma'am. All right, well then let's think about our actions before we do that, right? And so we went to a new church, and she came out, she had this little sassy attitude, and I said, we will not come back here. If you're going to start picking up attitudes of other kids, then we won't come back. And I said, God has made us different. We are unique, which everybody's unique. And anybody can say this to their child and to themselves. This goes for anybody. You are made unique. You're not made to follow. And when I say follow the kids that are doing wrong, follow humans that are doing wrong. Like, be the example, be that light, be that living epistle. It might be struggle, it might be hard, you'll feel alone at times, but you're not, because your Father's with you, right? So it all comes full circle. All these little lessons that he says in the Bible, all these little things that you're taught, if you put them together, they work together, just like the verse says, all things work together for his good, and it all does. So you might struggle, but guess what? He's going to introduce you to the right people that need to be there. You don't, and that's something that I learned from myself because of the situation I got in, because I was lonely, and I allowed myself to settle for something that I was much better than. I didn't deserve that. Nobody deserves that. But I didn't think I was worthy, and I didn't think that I was deserving. So now in my life, I have gotten I try to tell people that they are deserving, that they are worthy. People that I like, friends that I know, like I try to make it a point, even as uncomfortable as it is for me, because I don't want them to take it the wrong way.
Mhm.
Like, why are you, look, I'm trying to get used to like expressing kindness and love more, which is completely opposite. If you knew me way before, you'd be like, what? The one that pushed the Brolik button that was like, screw all of you guys, like go suck a big
Mhm.
toe somewhere. Yes, me, right? So
Mm.
that's called, redemption and renewal, and healing is ever going. So it's just one of those things. So I try to take all of that into consideration, and I try to teach her with a combination of things.
Mhm.
I don't want her to be soft, but I don't want her to be too hard. But there's got to be a little bit of both in there,
Right.
there, because life is going to be difficult. So here you got threefold today, you got a threefold. But then the thing is, afterwards we pray about it, and then I try to give her the understanding and that feeling, and then I'll just hug on her and love on her. And like, and I do explain to her, I don't enjoy doing this, but God has given me a job to do,
Mhm.
and He says in the Word, and I've pointed it out to her, that I'm supposed to train you up. I'm supposed to discipline you. These are the things I'm supposed to do. And if ever there's a time where I, you know, in the past, I'm like, am I doing this right? Am I not? Like, I just ask.
Mhm.
God, help me to try to teach her the way you need me to teach her. Because He knows what His plans are for her. I don't. Just like I don't even know what His plans are for me most of the time. So it's like, I don't understand, you know? So I need to
Mm.
lean on Him. I need to trust in Him. So when I'm having those hard days and stuff, and then I know I'm going to mess up because I'm human. I'm not perfect, and nobody is, right? Jesus was the
Mm.
only person that was perfect, and He fulfilled the law so that way we could all have His grace.
Mhm.
So that being said, I still make my mistakes. I do things out of anger at times. I will yell like there's no other, like nothing before. She's like, and then I feel guilty, and then I feel bad. However, the difference is now I have learned to apologize. I
Mhm.
ask her for forgiveness. I ask God for forgiveness. I do it all out in the open. I pray out in the open. I allow her to see everything that I go through. I allow her to see I allow her to hear me talking to God. I allow her to hear me praying. I allow her to hear me saying, I am sorry. I repent of this. I am sorry. Please help me, or giving thanks.
Mhm.
Thank you, God, for this food that I'm about to eat, right? And I stuff it in my face, yeah, or something. Or we always pray. But even if it's just something small, like something good, like we went to the PBR yesterday, and we were very blessed with something. And so as we left, I was like, thank you, God, for blessing us today, just as we were walking. So I'm trying to, I let her see all of that. And in letting her see all of that, it's strengthening me as well to
Mhm.
be more comfortable doing it and not caring what others may or may not see. And I have found that when I do that and other people see that, they say thank you, or they're like, that's refreshing, or it's like a spark for them.
Mhm.
And you don't you don't really ever correlate it, I think, with there's something that you need, right? You're craving something
Mhm.
and you might be having a bad day. I really needed to see that today, or that really uplifted you and stuff, because somebody else happened to allow their light to shine. And
Mhm.
so do the same thing, right? Be that example that you needed when you were a kid, be the example that you needed today, tomorrow, what your child needs, what somebody else's kid needs, what the person, just be an example. So that way, almost like that movie Pay It Forward, they just keep
Mhm.
going, just be an example and stuff. And so I just, with all the discipline and all the things, I try to take it all into consideration, and try to do that. And it seems to be working quite well, and stuff. So, there's, I can give her a look, or I'm like, and she sometimes she'll push it, but for the most part, she gets it. I also give her a lot of freedom.
Mhm.
She has her left and right lateral limits that she is allowed, and within those left and right lateral limits, I try not to be like, don't do this, don't run, don't do this, don't do that. Like, I try not to do any of that. This is your, there you go. Be a kid, explore, try to figure things out, and stuff, and be curious. Like, I don't ever want to stifle that, because, and a lot of people do, because they don't want to be bothered. They're, I think it was Neil Tyson deGrasse, the scientist. I had watched him a while back, and he made a comment where parents would come to him and say, how do I get my kids involved in science? Like, how do I do this? And I really want them involved. And he's like, the kids were like 12, 11, 12, something like that. And he's like, don't stop them from pounding on the pans. Don't stop them from opening and closing cupboards. Don't stop them from climbing in the cupboards. Don't stop them from doing something that's going to bother you. You stop children from doing things because you don't want to be bothered. And then you take it away. And then when you're ready, because now they're older, you say, why aren't you interested in that? Well, you suck the life of that right out of them. Why would they suddenly have an interest? They've adapted to find interest in something else, whether it be a video game, whether it be, reading instead of whatever. And so, I used to write plays when I was little, and I loved acting, and I loved just theatrical. She is the exact same way. And I remind myself, when she wants to do something, don't be like your dad in this aspect, because I wrote, and I remember as clear as day, I was like, can you do this play with me? And he was like, later, I will later. And later never came. And that was a running theme in our household. Oh, we'll do it later. And it never came. Or promises, like, I promise. Oh, that means no, so I now I do, even if it's just for a few minutes, like, I will pause what I'm doing, which can be kind of stressful because it's just me. So, it's like, I have to get this done. And you keep saying, watch this. And I'm like, and then I feel so bad because I'm like, stop, right? I have to do this. And it's like, and I try to keep her involved in the stuff that I'm doing, but you also want to let her be able to just play and stuff too. And it just gets overwhelming. It's a lot of stuff. Try to do it once. So I try. So
I think you're doing more than try. I think you are crushing it. Well, before I let you go, we are going to talk about something a little lighter, because we've talked about some pretty heavy topics today. We're going to talk about tattoos. I have spent very few weeks this year in a short sleeve shirt during podcast recording, because I live in a very cold area. So again, I'm in long sleeves, but I am at least representing Revolt Tattoos. I love tattoos, Crystal, so much. I have a ton of tattoos, and I was very impressed with you earlier because you know exactly how many tattoos you have, and it's not like 2, it's 13. And people ask me how many I have, and I'm like, I don't know. I lost count. I would love to hear your favorite tattoo that you have currently.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I don't really have a favorite, because they were all done I don't have ginormous tattoos. I all have, like, they're all very specific, ones. And they're all at different points for a different reason. This is a friend of mine that made it back from combat, but he died in a motorcycle accident. And so that was kind of like, there was that. This one, Ladylike, is a friend of mine. She has a company that it's called, that's the theme. It's Ladylike, and that's what it is. And, people are always, because she lifts, it's for the active female that is strong. And people are like, you're not lady enough. And it's like, the Ladylike thing. And then this on this wrist, it's the symbol for kill, and that was my trigger finger, and I got that right before I deployed. This is my Bible verse, my daily reminder of no weapon formed against me shall prosper. I think this one probably has the most significance because it is a reminder. But I also tend to look over it the most. I have on my ankles, they're just there. I went to on the inside of my heels, really. I have a cross on one side and a nautical star on the other. I went to training in Quantico, and on the way back, I was like, hey, we should be, do the typical Marine thing, get drunk and get tattoos. And we came back from the training and we landed in San Diego, and we just went to the tattoo parlor, and she had the girl I was with had the star on one foot. So I was like, oh, well, I'll just do the same thing on that one. And then I was like, I'm not a nautical star person. Like, that's not my thing. So I went and got a cross on the other one, and she put a matching star on her. So hers match, right?
Right.
Like, whatever. And then my lower back was, I think my second tattoo, and it's a cross, and it's got it's kind of pretty, it's the little tramp stamp on the lower back type thing.
Yep.
But it says smile now, cry later. And that was a very depressive time in my life. I was trying to be, it was very conflicted, I should say. I was struggling, and it says smile now, cry later, because later never comes. So you don't ever cry. And that's what that meant for me. So you're always smiling. I always had a smile on my face. There's always a facade going on, and everything. And my first tattoo, it's in the middle of my back. It's just a big cross, like 4 inches and 3 inches. And it's been done over because it looked horrible. Like, after a while, I looked at it, I was like, this is just a bad design. So I had somebody go over it and make it really cool again. And then I have my nickname, Brolik, up on the top part of my back. And that one, I got that one. The cross is just significant because that was my very first tattoo. The name was, a couple of the guys at the barracks with the tracks company and stuff like that. They gave me that nickname because I was a nice bully. So in a way, I was just very I would knock and come in at the same time. Or I would say, can I have some of that as I took it? So it's not like I just give you that, I would ask and do simultaneously. So it was one of those, you're a very polite bully. And I was like, well, you can't say no. They're like, really? You already took it out of me. So, and I'm like, well, I'll give it back. They're like, no. So just little things like that. It was fun. So, and then I have USMC. I have my moto tat. I refused to get one to where people could see it, and so I just put USMC.
Oh, right on. Okay.
Inside my lip. So that was that one. And then I have the two behind my ears. I have a grenade on one side. I got that one for free, and it was when I first got out of the Marine Corps. I went to some UFC fights, and a buddy had his friend worked at a tattoo parlor. And he was like, congratulations on your service and getting out. Here you go. I'll just do this. And there's more behind the grenade part, which we'll talk about some other time. And there's an M4 on this side. And I just thought it was a cool thing. So I had a grenade there. So I'll just stick it there. I saw it on somebody else and I liked it. So I was like, oh, I want to get that. But where would I put it? So all mine are spaced out and everything. Oh, and then I always forget this one, which sounds horrible. And I have Thor's hammer on my side, on this side. And it's got Neela's name in it, and it's got stuff because we have Scandinavian in us. So yeah. So I was like,
How
So
long
there you
ago
go.
did you get the inside of your mouth? Because how long do those last?
When was that? Yikes. That was quite some time
So
ago.
they last a while then.
No. Apparently, anytime I've told somebody that I have it, they're like, well, how is that fairly new? And I'm like,
Right.
no. I've had that since I think I went 2009, and I went to training 2000. Deployed in 2008. It's so funny what you recollect in
I
order
know,
to
right?
do a timeline, right? So I deployed in 2008, and before that, so in 2007, I was still at, so 2006,
Wow.
2006, 2007 time frame. And I remember when he did it, after he was done, because it's, it's tattoo, everything's raised, right?
Right.
And stuff. And so I'd sit there and I'd play with it. Like I'd put, like, rub my tongue over it, or I was going like this, and he's like, don't do that. And because I was just, it was new, and I was sitting right there, and he's like, don't rub it over your teeth, don't mess with it, leave it alone. Because if you rub it and you keep doing that, the ink's gonna come out, it's not gonna last, this and that. And I said, okay. And I never did that. And then I just forgot that it's there. So I don't ever like mess with, like, it's not like, I don't do any of that stuff with it. I don't dip. I don't, so that would affect it too, and stuff, and everything. And it just, maybe he just knew how deep to go with the ink in it as well too. I do know that it hurt. I was like, ew, that hurt. You scratch. It felt like he was like scraping the inside of my lip off. I was like, oh my goodness. So the ones behind the ear didn't hurt. It was just like, zzz, you're like, it's just the vibration and stuff. The inside of the ankles, those hurt. This side, oh, Neela was with me for the side one. And it was so funny. So there are times, like, because she's, running around or doing whatever. And so I'm over there, and she'll come over, and she'd stand there, and she'd be like, hold my hand, and she's like, it's okay, like, it's good. And then she'd be like, I'm gonna go play. I'm like, okay. Right? So, she did really good for being like 3 at the time, and stuff. So, but she was there for that one. That one hurt because it's right there on the ribs, and it's just that area. Like, and it got down, like, it's just not an area that you touch a lot and gets a lot of attention. So the inside hurt, these hurt, because it's all, there's nothing, I got nothing on me. So
right.
So that they hit every single nerve as they're doing stuff. So but yeah, I think, and I don't even remember, like, the back, the back hurts, but only when you get to the spine, like, it's kind of like pinchy type thing. Outside of that, but once you get to a certain point with tattoos, you're just like numb, and it's like, you're just like, all right, this is great, like,
just keep going, just get it done.
Right, you're done. Yeah. So
are there more in your future?
I want one more, but I can't even really say that because I don't like having 13. I don't like the number, and 14, like, I don't know, it's weird. So the number 7, like, anything having to do with sevens, because God made the world in 7 days, and biblically 7 of everything, or there's 3, but I just go with the 7 with things. And so I even do it when I work out. I'm like, I do things in increments of 7. So if I'm gonna go past the 7, I really got to commit to something. I'm like, I'm gonna do an extra. I'm not just doing an extra 5. It's like, you got to do an extra 7 if you're doing extra. It's like, so it's a thing. But I just I don't know. And it's just it's even. I'm lopsided right now. Like, but I don't think I will never. I really like I see, like, women that have, like, a tattoo, like the flag, or they have something patriotic or something, and I'm like, oh, that looks so cool. I could never do it. I kind of want something on my thigh, but I can't do it for some reason. I won't put things, like, everything is in a strategic spot, and I guess if I ever needed to, like, cover them up, they're very simple to cover up. If I needed to go do a job of some sort, if they needed to be covered up, they're all in places that would easily be hidden, and that's I like that. I don't, but I'm also not the type that's like, oh, let me get some little frill, like, line that's something cute, but like, no, it's got to have significant value. So we'll see. I kind of want to add to the side one, because I feel like when they did it, it was because I was like this, and it looked good, but then when you
Mhm.
sit up, like your body goes back to its normal size.
Right.
So once I did that, it was a little shorter than I thought it was going to be. So I kind of want to do something towards the bottom of it just to kind of extend it out just
Mhm.
a little bit and stuff. But it's not a priority. It's if
I
it
get
happens, it
that.
happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm not, it's not a therapy thing for me
It's not
anymore.
on the
So
schedule right now.
no. Mm-mm.
Crystal, where can people find you? So if they want to follow your amazing social media journey, where you definitely show #be the example, you show some great family photos. If they want to help you decide what you want to get for tattoo number 14, where can they find you?
I'm on Instagram as Brolik Stokes, so Brolik Stokes, and I am on Facebook. It's Crystal Brolik Stokes. However, I am more active on Instagram. So usually, what I post on Instagram automatically goes to Facebook, um, and so I'm more apt to check the Instagram stuff. It's simpler for me. It's just
Right.
a lot of less noise going on. But those two spots, and I'm always open. Like if somebody needs advice, or if they need prayer, if they have questions, or they're struggling, or they just need somebody to listen, or um, I've always said, just send me a message, um, and everything, and we'll just go from there. And I have no problem, but reach out, because you're not alone. And there's a lot of stuff going on, and the one thing that I will remind, though, is that you have to be ready for a change. Um, you have to be ready for something to be different on anything in your life that you're dealing with, any situation and stuff. But I'm always up to pray for somebody, or have a listen, and try to be an example of what they can what they can accomplish and stuff. So
Awesome. Crystal, you have been truly amazing. Thank you so much for your service. And thank you for spending some time with me here today. I already know you're going to have to come back, because there's so much more for us to talk about. So thank you. I appreciate you.
well, I thank you for having me, and I can't wait to do it again.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to hit that subscribe button and find us on the socials so that you don't miss anything strong enough. So remember, until next week, you are strong enough, you are worth it. Thank you for listening to the Strong Enough podcast. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform by searching Strong Enough. And on YouTube, we're on the Spear Talk channel. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Strong Enough Pod. If you have suggestions for an upcoming episode or a future guest, please reach out at strongenoughpod@gmail.com. Remember, you are worth it.